and before, but they said they'd check me out online and they'd listened to a sermon that I preached about 8 years before. So where was it? And I couldn't remember preaching that sermon at that particular church, but I thought, what on earth did I say? So you're always held accountable here. Are we ready to go now?
Yes.
All good?
All good.
Okay. Let's go. Yeah, so 10 Commandments. That's the slide we've been using. And I looked at it last week and I thought, oh, I'm not sure that gives me a happy impression. The picture of Charlton Heston in dark, looking angry and grumpy, that's the kind of, that some people think about God. That's the kind of image that they have of him, an old man who's not happy and is looking to find out what you're doing wrong, that kind of stuff. So anyway, it's a slide that had 7 times and nobody's boosted a tear, so that's okay. So we come to the 7th commandment, which is start at the first one, you'll get to 7.
Okay, try again.
There it is. There you go. You wanted to see that, didn't you? You shall not commit adultery. And the key thing I think we need to think about here is, why has God given us this? What is it that is the important thing? Yeah, we're getting chocolate just to soften the blow. Told by God. And when we also just to recognise that when we're talking about anything to do with sex, that there are always some of us who haven't done well in the past and have messed up and carry a bit of guilt and that sort of stuff. So I'm just aware that that is something that we need to be aware of. We also need to be aware that God is the God who forgives us. And that's the amazing truth. So definition of what we're talking about, just to be specific, we're talking about adultery is something when a married person has sexual relationships with someone who's not their spouse. So that marriage is the important part of this. There is another word that the Bible uses to talk about sexual relationships amongst people who are not married, and that's fornication. So, but specifically tonight we're dealing with adultery. Now, the other thing to mention about 10 Commandments is that they are very specific. There are no exceptions. And as you go through, you think, well, you know, last week Peter was talking to us, you shall not kill, you shall not murder. There are no exceptions. It doesn't say, but if the person deserves it, or nothing like that. And in this case, it's not, but if you just fall passionately in love or whatever, there's no exceptions. It's a very specific and clear yes or no, black or white situation. And it's important we talk about this subject because we live in a world that is very confused about sex. And the culture is just all over the show in terms of what this is all about. And we live in that culture and we are always getting messages, whether we know it or not, that can kind of start to muddy our thoughts at times. So it's important that we understand what God is saying. Because around us, and you will have heard this many times or seen it in the newspaper or whatever, there's a general view which says that anything that 2 consenting adults do in private is okay, providing they're adult and providing they're consenting. Why should that bother anybody else? Let them go ahead and do that. That's the sort of the kind of pervasive thinking that's in our world today. And I'm sure you've heard that being said. And it's got to, it kind of leads us down a spectrum of accepting all kinds of behavior to do with our sexuality. And I don't know, I mean, this is the Ashley Madison website, which has, I don't know, because they lie about the number, but there are millions of people who are members of Ashley Madison. And the whole purpose of this website is you can only join it if you're married. And the purpose of the website is to help you find another person for which you can hook up sexually. In other words, adultery is the important thing. And that's the byline. Life is short, have an affair. Now, that's not just a few people. That is an international website that's operating in many countries. And the organization that runs it has made millions of dollars about that. One of their other bylines is that monogamy is when you are husband or wife together, and that's the only sexual relationship you have. They say monogamy leads to monotony. And people go, oh, maybe it's more exciting elsewhere. I don't know. And yet, if you follow God's way, you know that that's an utter lie, that monogamy is a rich and wonderful and just the best gift from God that he has given us. And so we need to understand that we are not, that when God says something, he actually knows what he's talking about. All the research that has been done by sociologists find that happily married people are the happiest people of any section in our society, and that they find that their sexual life is rich and rewarding, far better than anybody that's on Ashley Madison website or people who are not married. that what God has said is something that is really important. So what we've got, and this is why it's really important to talk about it. What we've got is that we live in a world that is confused and is believing all kinds of lies because, how did this happen? Well, if you read Romans chapter 1, the second part of that chapter is the most helpful chapter to help you understand what's happening in the Western world today, because that talks about when people give up on following God, this is what happens. There's a list of stuff that happens that's listed in Romans chapter 1. And basically it says when people resist and give up on God, God takes his hand off and the world then can literally go to hell. And so the last verse of Romans 1 is helpful. Although they know God's righteous decree that those who do such things deserve death, they not only continue to do these very things, but also approve of them who practice them. That last line is really important. That they also approve of those who practice these things. And so if you stand up and say, that is wrong, you will be showered with a whole lot of response that's not positive. You'll be told that you are without tolerance, that you're uncaring, that you're unloving, all kinds of things. Because we live in a world where there are no foundational standards that everybody agrees with, then we now approve of other people. And if you don't approve, then you are intolerant. I remember hearing a saying once that the only thing that people who preach tolerance can't tolerate is intolerance. And intolerance is seen as a sin, not a godly way at all. That's not the way God wants us to be in terms of this kind of thing. So if we're going to talk about this, if we're going to talk about what is the essence of why God has given us this commandment, we actually have to go back and think about marriage. Marriage is the key component to this because it is a commandment for people who are married. And what is it that God has for us? Well, let's go back and look a little briefly at creation. And Genesis 2:18, then God said, it is not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper who is just right for him. Now, I don't know if that's going to work. Yeah, that word helper, that's probably a better translation, I think. The word helper is kind of a slightly inferior, you know, you're doing it, but I'm helping you. That's not the way God has created woman at all. And so some translations use this, suitable companion or some other thing to describe this. And then just down the chapter a little bit, this explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united into one. Now the man and his wife were both naked and felt no shame. Now, it's really important for us to understand there's a new word introduced into these. Firstly, you know, verse 18 is narrative, verse 25 is narrative, but verse 24 is comment. The writer to Genesis kind of stops telling what happened and makes a comment in verse 24. And the new word that's in those verses is the word wife. So we have marriage now in the essence at the beginning of creation. This is not a man and a woman. This is a husband and wife that God is referring to in this narrative, and is trying to show us just how important that is for us. Because God ordained marriage right at the very beginning, and he's continued to encourage us that this is the foundational unit of society. So when marriage becomes unstable and unsettled, society as a whole becomes unsettled and unstable. And we see that happening in our world today as numbers of people are there. That this basic unit of society is so important if we are to live in a world that is healthy and wholesome. You know, when you take a wedding, you've got the bride and groom there, and that I would ask them a question which includes, and will you remain faithful to him or her for as long as you both shall live? It's a fundamental question to ask to this couple who are committing themselves to live in a harmonious, loving relationship for the rest of their lives. Will you remain faithful to him or her for as long as you both shall live? And they all go, I do. But it doesn't always work out that way because, you know, Satan will try and trip them up and do all kinds of other things. I remember a long time ago now reading a book on pastoral care by a theologian guy called R.E.O. White. R.E.O.'s his initials. And I couldn't locate the quote, but this is my memory of it. So it's a kind of paraphrase of what he says when he's talking about marriage. He says, the most important characteristic of a marriage is the sexual relationship. Now, what do you think about that? He goes on, but you will immediately object that marriage is so much more than a sexual relationship. Marriage includes love, commitment, warmth, care and nurturing, friendship, protection, and much more than that, right? So we would agree with that. Then he goes, and you would be right in saying that about marriage, but all those wonderful aspects can also be expressed in other relationships that you might have. Those things can be expressed in the way we care for our children, or the way we care for our parents, or a relationship with brothers and sisters, or with a relationship with a close friend. All those things are possible. And the unique aspect of marriage is the sexual relationship. And that's the only part that God created for to express that sexual relationship is within marriage. And Jesus understood this, and he understood how important and how unique that relationship is to marriage, and how important for it to remain as a unique relationship within that context. So a couple of times they came to Jesus and said, what is the story about divorce? Is it okay to divorce? And back then there was, amongst the Jewish leaders, there was two schools of thought. One, pretty much you could just get rid of your wife by telling her to buzz off, right through to the other one, where Jesus adopted the conservative view. So, for example, he says in Matthew chapter 90, I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, and marries another woman commits an adultery. Now, it's really important that middle line's there. Because if we lift it out, I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife and marries another woman commits an adultery. That's a different kind of statement. But what Jesus did is he put that second line there. In other words, because the sexual relationship in marriage is the fundamental, unique component to that relationship, when that is attacked through adultery, the whole marriage and the foundation is taken away. And so what Jesus is saying here is that marriage is not, you just can't divorce. But where there is sexual adultery takes place, then that marriage is in such bad state that it also has to be renewed, and both parties would have to commit. Otherwise, it is grounds for divorce. There's only two grounds for divorce in the New Testament. That adultery is one of those. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, it is where if you find yourself, what was happening back there was that people were married and one of them became a Christian and became a follower of Jesus. And the husband or wife unhappy about that. And Paul in 1 Corinthians 7 says, if they want to desert you, please let them do so and you are free. So they're the only two grounds within God's economy that allows this divorce to take place. And so we need to have strong marriages. Because not only for our own sake and not only for our own welfare within the loving relationship that we can have with a husband or wife, but for the sake of society, we need this as well. So we're doing society a favor if we are able to maintain powerful, loving marriage for our own self. We're certainly not doing them any favor if we go down the opposite track. Dan Quayle was a vice president of the United States back in around I think 89 to 94, when George Bush Sr. was president. Now, Dan Quayle, unfortunately, had a real habit of putting his foot in his mouth and saying dumb things. And so he became an object of people laughed at some of the things he said. But one thing that he did when he was vice president, he wrote a very important article for the Atlantic magazine on the best way to eliminate poverty from the United States of America. And he had one answer, and that was to have strong, stable marriages. And when you do that, your economy goes up because you're not having to pay for children's support and split houses when you split, all kinds of messy things that happen when marriages hit the rocks. Unfortunately, because he had the habit of putting his foot in his mouth, those who refused to accept that then laughed that off as well. And it never really got the attention that it should have. If he said plenty of dumb things, this was the one great thing that he said during his time he was vice president, that the economy of the country would be the best it will ever be if we had strong, stable marriages. And so you can see why God is saying, do not commit adultery. Firstly, your life will be worse off as a result, and the community that you live in will be worse off as a result, because the loving, caring, nurturing relationship of marriage is the foundational unit that God set, and we were created to keep it. Now, a long time ago, a Oxford sociologist called J.D. Unwin produced a paper which has become a kind of seminal paper. The fact that it was done in 1939 does not make it old-fashioned, because what he was doing was he looked into history and tried to analyze what the key things happened in 6 civilizations that led those civilizations to eventually disintegrate. And the thing he saw was the lack of restraint in people's behavior became more and more evident, and their lives started to unpack. And he saw the pivotal example of the lack of restraint in the sexual morals starting to come unglued in that civilization that eventually led to that thing. So he called his research, he wasn't looking for it, but he called his research an investigation into sex and culture. In other words, he saw that as the defining factor that caused civilizations to crumble. I think we don't have to look very far outside the Western culture now and see that things are coming unglued. And we also know that in the last half century, the sexual mores of our culture have changed radically. And no one is, in fact, if you say things like I've been saying, you are seen to be intolerant and bigoted and all kinds of things like that, because the most important thing is that you are free to do what you want, and I'm free to do what I want, and I have no ability to talk about what you're doing. But God is not like that, and he does have he sees it as an essential component to our society, that we live in a world where there are sexual values that are very, very closely held, and we are able to, just live on that. So Hebrews 13, verse 40, marriage should be honored by all, and the marriage bed kept pure. For God will judge the adulterer and the sexually immoral. That's a clear statement, and one that we need to kind of get hold of and not allow the culture that we live in to begin to muddy that or water it down or get it slightly out of focus, but that we see this as a foundation. And we are called, if we are followers of Jesus, we are called to be part of the answer to a lost world. And this is one essential component that allows that to happen. Now, I'm sure that you've met people who have not been able to live up to this commandment, and you've seen what happens in those kinds of lives. You know, I guess over the years, I have just had broken-hearted people come to see me because their husband or wife has not kept this commandment, and they're just devastated. They will never be the same again. So in your tables now, I just have a question for you. So let's put some practical legs to this. How would you seek to help a close friend who is married, but who is drifting into an unhelpful romantic relationship with someone they're not married to, of course? how would you seek to help them? What would you do? So over to you. Can you talk about that briefly?